You couldn't believe this. The very thing you swore to protect ended up becoming the worst nightmare you've ever experienced. Everyone you've ever known, everything you've ever watched, every sense of comfort you've ever had was at the back of your mind now. The idea of being lost in space on a huge hunk of metal endlessly floating around on an otherwise empty and deserted planet seemed rather scary enough on its own. After all, despite the advancing technology our species manages to conjure up in only a matter of decades, there isn't a single machine or invention in the world that could have expected this. It all seemed relatively new and innocent at first. Thinking back to what landed you a spot here, your mind immediately traveled back to only a few days earlier, which at this rate seemed almost as if it were years. You and your mining team were sent down to this deserted planet, which in itself felt like a fishy idea, obviously not aware of the danger at the time. Upon further investigation of its dry and dead surface, you and the others stumbled across some sort of artifact, most certainly not crafted by anything from man. It towered over everyone, emitting this almost eerie red glow through the cracks of its already polished surface. The tip of the statue-like object separated off into two different points, appearing as though they were overlapping each other to create the illusion that it were two halves conjoined into one. Written across its almost marble-looking surface were a series of characters, clearly unrecognizable as any given language familiar to the team, let alone humans as a whole. Everything was inscribed in this weird formation of symbols, periods, and lines that looked to be just pure scribble. Taking this massive finding back to the ship in complete and utter awe and excitement from the fact that you just found evidence of alien life existing on this planet, that's where things started to drift apart. Whatever this thing was, it looked as though it had some form of life to it. Granted, it's not the kind of life humans or animals would have, but it definitely had something going on inside of it. Whatever this thing was, it clearly wasn't settled, and if it wasn't for the glow coming from inside the object, it was making numerous others anxious and sick just by being around it for a little too long than intended to. You made your way back to the original boarding station to signal the captain that you found something that requires immediate investigation. Responding back almost immediately and also an obvious sign of excitement. The marker, as your friends would call it, was immediately shipped on board with some minor issues with managing to get it on board. With those things aside, everything didn't exactly go too terribly at first. At most of what was going on was seen as a normal procedure for something like this. Things like this weren't discovered often, so it was new to basically everyone. Your mind proceeded to bounce in and out of reality, looking back at your current situation and now at the old one. The only thing you were left to do now is ponder on your thoughts. That marker single-handedly wiped out any source of life on the ship, and you use that term very loosely. It shifted these once innocent people into animalistic beasts, and that in itself isn't capable of fully describing who or what these things truly were. They weren't the living dead like you'd expect to see in the movies or television. This was something much more disturbing and unexplainable. Something from inside this object was set off, and people you once talked to on board that ship on a semi-regular basis were shifted into a series of thoughts that eventually led to their very demise. Friends and strangers alike began attacking one another, creating a gruesome scene that spread throughout Station 1 in only a matter of a few minutes, soon spreading onwards to Section 2 and 3. This wasn't people just going mad, this was a disease, a plague, a parasite. These people were shifting into monsters, their skin peeling away from their faces, their jaws severed into pieces, muscle tissue and facial matter hanging on by only a thread. Eyes which once varied from colors like blue or brown were bloodshot and shifted into deep, disgusting shapes of red and black, some missing their eyes almost entirely. Extra pairs of arms and other former limbs began sprouting through various holes the victim would rip into themselves, spilling out their crimson-colored insides across the once polished surface the station was complimented for. Those who were capable of surviving would have been lucky enough to die in the process, as these creatures would feast upon, or even worse, reanimate you into the very thing you swore to protect yourself from. Being as you locked yourself inside of a security room down the hall to Station 4, you could hear them from the outside, emitting screams of blood-curdling savagery. You did your best to hold in your worry and heard from what was becoming your life. It's been days, and you still haven't left this room without a single drop of water or a crumb of food to savor on your stomach. Your radio calls for help have been left unanswered, and it almost feels as if the station has been doing it on purpose, in fear that something did indeed go wrong. Screaming would only get you killed. Crying was useless. Calling for backup led to nothing but a silent hum on the other end of the phone. You weren't certain if other survivors were out there, but risking your life just to find out didn't seem to be a very appealing idea on both paper and in actual thinking. You sat there and waited. You listened, you huffed, you puffed. Every minute that passed by felt as though it were dragging on by another extra 10 minutes. Your stomach grumbled and your mouth felt dry. A cold chill shot down your spine, immediately making you shiver in the process. Your eyes darted from one corner of the room to the other, noticing the obvious distress signs of bloody handprints smearing on the glass across the windows surrounding you. The computer desk you once used to document your daily information was shattered and thrown across the room, separating into numerous pieces with both the screen and almost every single key that was once perfect and intact on a keyboard you yourself had brought from home. The idea of something like home struck something inside of you, triggering the response to cry again. The family you once loved and took care of led up to this very moment of space expedition, resulting in it ending this way. There would be no way for your family to find out what was going to happen to you. The government that issued this expedition was going to cover things up, even if it didn't go south in the first place. Your heart felt as it exploded inside of your chest at the sudden clank of something hitting itself against the door beside you. The noise became more apparent with a second impact, resulting in a brutal smashing of what resulted in pouring liquid against the hard metal surface. You gasped for a second, holding your mouth in every attempt to stay calm, warm tears rushing down your cheeks and across the burning cuts you already received just by trying to hide in here. Nothing in your office would have been able to be used against these monsters. No guns, no machinery, not even hand-to-hand combat. Word went around the ship as the parasite was continuing to spread, explaining that the only way to truly kill them is to sever all their main limbs, and that only headshots were ineffective. This was something straight out of science fiction, and the fact that one of them was fumbling to get inside of your room at that very moment made you instinctively snatch the remote used for signing in to hitting any button you can without looking in hopes that it would work. Hello? 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 A male voice on the other end of the line picked up, sounding semi-confident. You cried into the signal, setting off the obvious alarms you were in danger. Yes! Yes! Hello? Is anybody there? I'm here! Before you or the man could say any more, the signal was cut short, following a voice message that made your blood run cold and make every hair on the back of your neck stand up. This message was recorded on the U.S.G Ishimura on Friday, August 13th at 2:25 p.m. Would you like to call this number? You hung up, realizing that you were listening to a voicemail, sinking back against the wall and exhaling out of pure exhaustion and loss of hope. Your eyes made one last dart across the room until they trained on the window, no less than 10 feet away from you. On the other side wasn't one, but at least 15 of those disfigured walks of life. Realizing that your attempt at a call was what issued all of them to come to your location in the first place. You watched in silence as each and every one of them pushed, shoved, and slashed into the glass, creating a more obvious indentation the further they pushed. Accepting your fate, the only remaining memory that comes back into mind is the last time you held your son before taking your flight to the headquarters. The look on his face, the anticipation of seeing you again in only a matter of years. The fading smile of your partner as you left the station with your fingertips pressed across the smooth, chilling glass. Lost without a signal. The very thing you promised to keep was the very thing you lost only days into what was supposed to be a groundbreaking discovery. The loss of every will you kept to keep fighting. The loss that costed you your beating heart. The loss that ended not only anything, but everything.